1896, in a small temple town in South India, a 16-year-old boy sat down on the floor of a temple and never really got up again. Not because he couldn't move, but because he had stopped needing to. His name was Venkataraman. The world would later call him Ramana Maharshi. He had no guru, no initiation, no scripture handed to him in a moment of crisis. What happened to him was simpler and stranger than any of that. One afternoon, alone in his room, a sudden and intense fear of death overtook him. Not a thought about death, the actual, visceral certainty. I am going to die now. Most people in that moment would panic. He did something else. He lay down, made his body still like a corpse, and asked himself a question. What is it that dies? The body will die. That much was obvious, but am I the body? He went further. If I am the body, then when the body dies, I should die too. But is that true? Is there something here that doesn't depend on the body at all? He searched, not with words, not with belief. He turned attention back on itself, toward the one who was asking the question. And in that turning, the fear of death dissolved. Not because he found an answer, but because he found the one who was afraid. And that one was not what he thought it was. For the rest of his life, over 50 years, mostly in silence, at the foot of a sacred mountain called Arunachala, people came to him with their problems. Career, relationships, anxiety, spiritual ambition. Questions about God, karma, the afterlife, the nature of the universe. And again, his answer was almost insultingly simple. To whom does this problem occur? Someone would say, I am suffering. And he would ask, who is suffering? I am. And who are you? This is not a trick question. It is not meant to be clever. It is meant to be taken completely literally. Most of us spend our entire lives answering the question, who am I? With a list, my name, my job, my history, my body, my thoughts, my feelings, my role, son, mother, employee, failure, success. Ramana's method, what came to be called self-inquiry, or Atma Vichara 2014, asks you to stop accepting that list. Not to argue with it, not to meditate it away, just to look. Where does the sense of I actually arise? Not the idea of I, the felt sense, the I am that exists before you add anything to it. He said, every thought, no matter what it's about, fear, desire, memory, plan, Every single thought is built on top of one prior. Thought the thought I am afraid. I want this. I remember that. Remove the I thought, and where do the others go? He wasn't asking you to believe a philosophy. He was pointing at an experiment you could run. Right now, in your own direct experience. With no equipment, no teacher required, and no belief necessary.
People who visited Ramana often described something strange. They would travel for days, sometimes weeks, carrying a question they were certain they needed answered. And then they would sit in front of him, and the question would simply stop mattering. Not because he silenced them. He rarely spoke first, he would simply sit, present, unmoving, radiating something that had no name in any language his visitors spoke. This was mana, silence, but not the absence of communication. He called it the highest form of teaching. Words, he said, are needed only when the listener cannot yet receive silence. Think about that for a moment. How much of your inner life is noise? Running commentary, anticipation, replay, argument. Because some part of you doesn't trust silence enough to simply stop. Ramana lived most of his life on the slopes of Arunachala, a mountain considered, in the local tradition, to be Shiva himself, consciousness in the form of stone. He rarely left it. He needed nowhere else to go. Because the question he had asked as a 16-year-old boy, what is it that dies, had led him somewhere that didn't move. Somewhere that was already, always here. Underneath the noise, underneath the seeking, underneath even the question itself. Here is the part that tends to unsettle people the most. Ramana never claimed to have achieved some special, rare state. He insisted, again and again, that what he had realized was not an attainment. It was not something added. It was the removal of a mistake. The mistake of believing you are the character, the name, the story, the body, the history, instead of the awareness in which that character appears. He used to say, liberation is not something that will happen to you in the future. It is your very nature, right now, obscured only by the habit of looking everywhere except at the one who is looking. So, who are you? Not your job, not your name, not your past, not even this voice you're listening to right now. Before you answer with a word, just for a moment, look. That's the whole teaching. That's the entire 50 years distilled into a single gesture, turning attention back toward its source. Ramana Maharshi didn't ask you to travel to a mountain in India.
He asked you to turn around, right where you're sitting, and see who has been reading these words.